So, without further ado, I'm going to bring Nicole Stratman from Orange County Social Services up here, and then also Dr. Sorrells. I better get that right. I think I've heard your name pronounced quite a few times. So, they're going to be our third plenary for the day, and I am going to ask both of them. I don't know if you want to have a seat here. You want to stand here? Okay. And then I am going to ask them, I'm going to pass the microphone here so that they can introduce themselves and give a brief background of the organizations that they're with and the work that they're doing for anti-human trafficking.
Thank you, and good afternoon. I'm excited to be here. I just came from another conference in Long Beach, so got right down here, but excited to be here this afternoon. My name is Dr. Shantina Sorrells, and I am the Chief Program Officer at Orangewood Foundation. We have programs where we work with those who are at risk and survivors of commercial sexual exploitation and trafficking. And so that is the work that I do. I'm also a Vanguard alum, so it's always just weird when I'm here because I went to school here, but it is very different. Everything looks different, so I got kind of lost, but I'm here.
Hi there. Hi there. My name is Nicole Stratman, and I work for the Orange County Social Services Agency. I have been with social services here in Orange County for over 23 years. I'm currently an administrative manager for our program for Resource Families, Recruitment, Development, and Support. Resource Families is the terminology that we use here now in California for foster parents. And so my team recruits and trains foster parents.
Button. Hello. All right, I'm here. I'm real. So we decided to really take this conversation in a dialogue format. We thought it would just be great. One, Nicole and I have worked together in a capacity of we had a program that she was the administrator for, and so we just know each other so well. We just thought it'd be more fun if we just talked to each other. Are y'all okay with that? All right, and you can talk with us too. So it's okay. There's going to be time for question and answers. This is a dialogue. All right?
Yes.
So with that being said,
Should we go into a little bit more of that?
I thought we kind of started just even dig in. Nicole,
Yeah.
You said a little bit about your work, but like really tell us about your work and your interaction with youth and what that means and kind of the broader span of what you've done.
Okay, so I'll give you, a little bit more history about where I've been on this journey of my career. When I started over 23 years ago, I've held a variety of positions within Children and Family Services. And Children and Family Services in Orange County is the child protection unit in Orange County. And so what we do is we investigate child abuse, calls that come into our child abuse hotline. And I started in our unit, or a program, where we investigated the allegations that were filed before the court once a child was removed from the custody of their parent or was determined that there was need for court oversight while the child remained in their home. So I started with that type of an investigation in my background. I then moved on to emergency response. And that for us is responding to those calls that are made to the child abuse hotline. You're going out into the field, knocking on doors, either an immediate response or within 10 days of the call that comes in the hotline to determine if child abuse has occurred and then make some assessments for the family. I've also held a very unique position as a social worker, and I was our family law court liaison for 6 years. And what that was is that I would testify in family law court as a representative of the social service agency when there was a child custody battle and child abuse allegations. And so oftentimes it would help the court determine the safest spot for a child or the child's best interests as it related to a child custody family law hearing. I went on from there back to emergency response as a supervisor, and that's when I had the opportunity to really learn about human trafficking, human sex trafficking, and commercial sexual exploitation. It was in that role that I was able to help create our program for commercially sexually exploited children, or CSEC, in the County of Orange. We opted into funding through the state to be able to create programs, to be able to have a contract. That's when Shantina and I had an opportunity to get to know each other, when the social service agency awarded a contract with Orangewood Foundation to provide a CSEC support and resource center, drop-in center for our youth. And she can certainly talk more about that. But it was really exciting in those years to be able to build this program and build the awareness that we now have, to really partner here with Ensure Justice and the Global Center for Women and Children. It was really an exciting time. We continue to do that work. I've since moved on, as I mentioned, to managing our program for resource families as we recruit them. We need so many more resource families to come up and take children that we have that need a safe place to live while their parents are working to reunify with them. And so I've done a variety of different things, and primarily have worked with families and children who have abuse or suspected abuse that they've had in their family. And so tell us a little bit more about your history, Shantina.
Sure. So I will even start further back than my career. I spent 13 years in the foster care system. I was in Northern California, San Francisco, Alameda County. And so for me, we didn't have terminology back then that we do now, but seeing many of those that I was in foster care with in exploitative situations, being coerced into situations. And so, again, didn't have the terminology back then, but understood that those were things that were happening in the community that I was a part of, and knew I wanted to make a difference, knew I wanted to do something different. I had no idea. I was adamant I didn't want to be a social worker.
What?
That was, I know. I've come a long way, obviously.
Yes, you have.
I have a whole master's and doctorate in it, but yes.
Well, then there's
but
that.
I did. I was adamant. Like, I don't want to be those people, right? Because my experience was my experience at that point in time. And so I took the little bit of left field, and I came to Vanguard, and I did my BA in psychology. And one of the things you will find if you study psychology is you learn a whole lot more about yourself than anything else, and really realize some things. And for me, a lot of it was just the experiences I had been through had shaped me in the way I saw the world and where I was going to go out into the world. And Vanguard prepared me for some of the challenges I would also face in the world, but also healed in a lot of ways from my own experiences. And so I was able to kind of really shift gears and go, okay, maybe social work is not so bad,
It's not so bad.
but I'm still not ready, right? And so I was able to actually take some jobs. I did some after-school rec, and I did some program recs, and I started working in group homes. And having come from the foster care system, I was like, this is not the way. This is not the answer. Like, this is not something that our youth deserve so much better. They deserve so much more. And I still didn't have answers, but I knew I had questions. And so I actually wound up moving all the way to the East Coast to find those answers. But I moved to the East Coast and actually worked for a pilot program that was specifically for working with youth from Baltimore and Washington, D.C. I lived in Maryland, Frederick, Maryland, if you've ever been out there. Lots of cows. But lived out there, and it was exciting. It was a program that was specifically providing respite for youth with mental health diagnosis, so anywhere from ADHD to schizophrenia. And it was the whole gamut, and it really was recreation-based, so we got to take these kids and go have fun, basically. But that really helped them with social skills and seeing the world differently. And again, I started to see the same things that I saw in my own environment when me growing up. Most of these youth were in foster care or had situations where they were living with a relative, and it was just some of the same things. And I was like, okay, so this still isn't the answer. Where else can I look? And I was lucky enough that my boss was an MSW, a social worker, and she helped me see that there's different sides of social work, and that you can go the macro route, and that you can look a whole different level at it and see it from a systems perspective and see it as program design and all the nerdy side, and like the research and the data. And I was like, okay, that feels more like me. Like, that might be something I like. And so I wound up coming back to California, going to Cal State Long Beach, go Beach, and getting my master's in social work. And I had started working for an organization called Boys Town, which is a national organization. Yeah, I see some hands. So loved it. And really what I saw is they did things differently. The way the programs were ran, how they cared about the kids in our programs. And we had 5 homes out in Trabuco Canyon, and we would get many youth who, back then, again, there weren't even labels yet at that time, but we would get youth who had been exploited and who had been coerced. And so we would be figuring out, like, how can we provide the best treatment? Like, what can we do for these young people? And then doing community-based services as well. And so I just learned a lot on the outskirts of this arena, if you will, not knowing that I was in it. I really didn't know I was in it. And then Sandy Morgan came and spoke at one of my classes, and she was talking about modern-day slavery and all of these things, and I was like, what is she talking about? But I really learned, and I leaned in. And from that day on, I remembered, and I just started thinking about, how does this intersect? How does this work with what I am already doing? And so my work at Boys Town changed. I went to the national office, and so I was working in our fidelity and evaluation department across the country. And again, I saw this happening in Louisiana, happening in Rhode Island, happening in Nebraska. So I was like, this is a really big issue. Like, this is a problem across state lines, county lines. Like, it's happening everywhere, and it's happening right here. And so I was like, I could do more. Let's figure out what this looks like. And so about 3.5 years ago now, I came to Orangewood Foundation. And specifically, Orangewood Foundation works with young people, 16 to 24, mostly, but then one of our contracts allows us to work with young people 11 to 21 who are at risk or have experienced CSEC. And so with that, what I've been able to see is us design a program that doesn't really exist anywhere else. And so I've taken all that macro stuff that I did, taken all that data and kind of pieces, and really looked at what are we doing and what's working, and really looking at who are we serving, and what are those different components and pieces that we can share with others, but also what are some of the pieces that we need to do better, because this is still new and emerging, and things are changing, and we're learning things every day. So how can we continue to evolve and do better in this work and in this field? And the number one way is by listening to our young people. It's by listening to our youth. Guess what? I'm old now. I know. And I don't have all the answers. And that's adultism at its finest. And so the reality is that our young people actually have the answers when we stop to listen to them. And so my job at Orangewood has really been coming in, looking at our programs, helping them up their quality, helping them up how we capture our youth's voice and use our youth's voice to really determine what's best. And so my work has been more on this outside sphere of things, if you will, but now bringing those skill sets into this work specifically within CSEC and trafficking.
Great.
Now it's I get to ask you a question.
Yeah, I guess
All
so.
right.
That's the plan.
Right? So the topic is youth in crisis.
Yes.
So in your career, have you seen, what kind of situations do you run into? Because I think it's like me. I thought it was scary to be a social worker, and I didn't understand what it all entailed. So maybe talk to us a little bit about what kind of situations do you see?
Okay, so I will talk about what do we see in the child welfare system. As I had mentioned, that's where my career has been for over 23 years. So we see youth once an allegation of child abuse has been suspected and a call has been made to the child abuse hotline. And so we tend to see kids more sort of up the stream or down the stream, whichever part of the stream things are getting a little rough, that part of the stream. And so allegations are being made, families are in crisis, kids are in crisis, and we have to figure out what level of crisis are they in, what are they experiencing? Are they experiencing it? Sometimes we find that it's unfounded, it's false information, or that it didn't occur in the way that the caller thought it was occurring, and it wasn't abuse at all. So I wanted to share the types of abuse that we see in Orange County, because that's where I've been. What we see in Orange County, what some of our statistics are, we see a lot when it comes to child abuse, exposure to domestic violence. We see a lot of parental substance abuse that affects their ability to care for and provide for the safety and welfare of their child. That's primarily what we see. We also see physical abuse, sexual abuse, exploitation, and severe neglect. And what we also see in our commercially sexually exploited children is oftentimes that they have prior histories of abuse as well. So they're a little bit more of a complex victim that we're working with. Every year, Orange County Child Welfare, the social service agency actually, puts out a conditions of children report. And that has a lot of really, really good information about what does child abuse look like in Orange County and what are we doing as an agency and how are we responding to that. And I think sometimes the numbers are interesting. It doesn't always tell all the details of the story, and I can certainly share more of that. But what we do know about child abuse and neglect is that it crosses all socioeconomic statuses as well as racial and ethnic boundaries as well. Nobody is immune to abuse, and most kids are vulnerable to some form of abuse, especially when we start talking about commercial sexual exploitation and kids spending time on the internet or on social media. And so we find that the number of children growing up in foster care is also increasing. Children coming into foster care, especially at an older age, have much more complex needs, much more complex mental health issues, and so providing the right kinds of services and support to them and their families have become more difficult. Oftentimes they experience many placements, so that's a concern that I have in my current role, is finding placements for children if they don't have a family member that they can go to. Because when a child comes into protective custody, the very first thing we do is look for them to be with a family. If they can't be home with their parent or their guardian, whoever's legally responsible for them, we always look for a family member or a non-related extended family member like a neighbor or a coach or a teacher, somebody that they already have a relationship with. We have over, I think we're close to 65% of our youth in foster care, it's between 60 and 65, depending on the month, are with somebody they already had a pre-existing relationship with. So we really strive very hard to ensure that our kids are with somebody that they know. But our kids that are older, our kids with complex trauma, tend to go to many different types of placement and are in group homes that Shantina just mentioned, or what we call them now is short-term therapeutic residential programs, STRTPs, trying to help them with some of their therapeutic needs to help them heal and be able to go back home or maybe be able to go into other family-based care. In 2021, the statistics are 25,860 children were the subject of a child abuse investigation. But of that number, 17.7%, that's just about 4,500 children, the allegations were substantiated. And substantiated means by the person who conducted the investigation, the social worker in the field, determined that it was more likely than not that the abuse had occurred to that child. And so that's where the substantiation comes from. Now, not every child who has been found to be a victim substantiated of some sort of child abuse results in coming into protective custody. In fact, our number of children that we end up filing a petition for juvenile court on is about 6% of those kids where there's a substantiated, or 6% of the kids that we go out on come into protective custody. And actually, to clarify that, some of them don't actually come to protective custody. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we find that some kids, families need to have court oversight. So they're still in the home with their parent, their mother or father or both, but a petition before the juvenile court has been filed. And so again, of the 25,000 kids that we go out and investigate, 6% come before the judge, a very small percentage. Most of our work that we do is really in prevention and crisis intervention, and we'll get into a little bit of more of that later. I want to let you know the types of abuse that's most commonly substantiated, at least our numbers are showing for 2021, is 71%, almost 72%, the allegation substantiated was general neglect. And general neglect means that there was some type of neglect to that child. Exposure to domestic violence is one type of neglect that we categorize exposure to domestic violence under general neglect in Orange County. Other counties will put that in emotional abuse. It can go there too. But in Orange County, that is in general neglect. If a parent is using a controlled substance and is unable to care for their child and provide for their safety and welfare, so it's not just substance abuse on its own. It has to be linked to their inability to keep their child safe in some way. That is general neglect as well. And then we have 9% of our kids is because of at-risk or sibling abuse. So something didn't happen directly to them, but it did to their sibling. They live in that home with that person who we determined was being abusive to one sibling, but not the other. So that's sort of makes sense, right? And then we come down to severe neglect. And severe neglect for us means that an injury occurred because of the neglect. So we'll see in children who have near drownings, for example, and they have some sort of medical issue that has gone on for them because they nearly drowned and it was neglectful. That would be like a severe neglect type of an allegation there. Sexual abuse, I think, is most people kind of know what sexual abuse is. We have about 4.4%, and then 3.4% for physical abuse. We also have caretaker absent or incapacitated. That is when a parent's unavailable to provide for their child for a variety of reasons. It could be that they're missing for some reason. Maybe they're incapacitated in that they have a mental health diagnosis that puts them into a hold at a psychiatric hospital and they're not available for their child and they didn't make any other arrangements. And then we have exploitation, which is 0.6% of our investigations, and 0.5% are emotional abuse. Those types of abuse, those come out of the penal code. The penal code directs child welfare in the type of abuse we are to investigate and what each definition of child abuse is. Now, there may be people who think that, something about how a parent is parenting their child is abusive, because that's an opinion about parenting, but it may not be what the legal code is. The Child Abuse and Neglect Reporting Act is is in the penal code and describes those kinds of abuses. And so we really are basing our investigations on what the code says, not our own independent opinion, like, putting a child in front of a TV all day long. We would get some of those calls back before there were screens, iPads and things like that. So sitting in front of a TV all day long and one parent's not happy that the other parent's allowing that to happen, that's not abuse, because that's not what it says in the Child Abuse and Neglect Reporting Act. Could be a parenting issue, but we have to really determine, is it a child welfare matter that we go out and investigate? And then in 2000, what I wanted to also add, if you don't know, I've spoken about this before at this conference, but in 2014 is when it was directed that child welfare would be responding to commercial sexual exploitation and sex trafficking as a child abuse matter. And so that has been a big part of our work and our partnership here with Dr. Sorrells as well. So tell us a little bit then about transitional age youth.
Yeah, I think that's a great segue, because
Yeah.
I think talking about how youth experience traumatic situations and crisis when they're under 18, guess what? It doesn't stop when you turn 18. So primarily us working with 18 and 24-year-olds, a lot of times what we see and what comes up is those ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences, that have happened throughout their time as a child really do come up in their young adulthood years. And for numerous reasons. We're talking about one of the times when your brain is in the fastest development, when your frontal lobe is finally coming up. And your frontal lobe, I can get real nerdy and technical. Shout out to Gail Brosnan Waters, my professor here, neuropsych years ago. But really, what it means is that's your logic center. That's the thinking part, right? That's the part that connects our animal brain, as we call it, or our limbic system, to like rational thought. And so during that 18 to 24 years, that is like rapid firing, things are happening. But when you've had significant events that have happened in your childhood, one of the categories that Nicole listed, or even being removed from your home, as amazing as my partners at SSA are, no matter what we do or how we do it, being removed from your home is traumatic. The reasons you were removed from your home are traumatic. Being in foster care is traumatic. It's traumatic. So when we're talking about all that trauma or adverse childhood experiences, we know that doesn't just go away. And, there's also a time and a place when certain interventions can help. So if your frontal brain isn't done, but we put you in talk therapy, the likelihood is you can't connect the dots between why you're feeling the way you're feeling and what's going on in your head, and then the rational thoughts. So we really have to think about what are our interventions. So with our 18 and 24-year-olds, we're really trying to take some different approaches. So at Orangewood Foundation, we really look at our programs through a couple of different lenses. So one is trying to ensure that our young people have spaces that actually are created and made for them. So every single room in our facility, a youth walked it with us, helped us to determine what colors do we put on the walls, what type of furniture should we have, where should we have a window, What kind of things are most important for them to feel safe in that space? We also redesigned our kitchen, so we always have food available, like literally all the time, right? But that's those basic needs. If you come in and you need to deal with an issue, but you're hungry, you all are not hungry right now. You're satiated, you just had lunch, you're feeling real good, your basic needs are met. But if we drop the temperature to 50 degrees in here, how many of you would have a really hard time? Thank you, right? So that's a basic need, right? If we didn't have a roof and the sun was shining down on your head right now, how many of you would have a really hard time? Shelter, it's a basic need. So these are real things that we have to create spaces for when we're thinking about serving our youth. So before we even serve them, we have to think about the space we're creating. And so that's really important. And then once we do have them in the door, how are we talking to them? How are we speaking to them? How are we connecting with them? So we have to make sure that our language, we're not over generalizing things, but we're also not being so super smart and intellectual that our kids don't understand us. So we are really thinking through those different components of how we work with our youth, how we speak with our youth, what that looks like. And then the other places that we're really looking is like, what type of programs do we actually need to have? And again, not thinking that we know everything, but really talking to our young people. Our young people are in a space where they want to explore what they want to do. So that may mean school. So we have scholarships and grants for that. That may mean working. We have a workforce program. That may mean that they're a young parent and they need support figuring that out and seeing what that is. So we have a home for young mothers to be able to go to and get that guidance and support. It may be they need a safe place to live and figure it out. And so we have housing for that. We have a drop-in resource center. It's absolutely no barrier. So a youth walks in, today, a young person, they get services. We have hygiene, we have showers, we have laundry. We want to make sure all of those needs are met. That is only the baseline for building some trust. That's the baseline for starting engagement. I can't walk in, a youth just walks in, and I'm like, great, here's some food. Okay, tell me all about your traumatic history and what kind of services can I offer you. That would not work at all, right? So what we find is it takes 4 to 5 times of a youth coming back and getting their basic needs met before they engage in services. And that engaging in services may just mean, hey, do you mind if we talk for a minute? Sure. Never mind, right? And that's common. That happens until they build that trust, and then they may be willing to talk to us. And then our goal is to create a safety plan. We're going to work with them. We practice harm reduction. If we come in and slap the shackles on and lock everything down, they don't come back. And so we really focus on a harm reduction model. How can we help you make choices that are going to keep yourself safe today? So if a youth is in crisis, everything in my fiber in being wants to save, rescue, fix it, make it all better. And that's probably why you're all here today. How do I make it better? But the reality is you don't get that choice. Sorry, harsh truth. It's kind of what I'm known for. But yeah, you don't get that choice. But what you do get is the opportunity to sit in front of them and listen. You get the opportunity to sit across from them and hear their worldview and ask them how you can be of service to them, how you can help them. And you listen and you try and make those moves. And then slowly we work on creating some safer behaviors, looking at some different options. And when they're ready, we get them into one of those services that I discussed. But it's always the youth's voice and choice, the way they see it. We are really thankful that we get to have partners where we can really customize and individualize how we work with our young people. So if they come in, there's not a prescriptive, you must fill out this form, you must do these things, this is the only way you get our help and services, which is how a lot of services are designed. But that is not going to allow you to engage with someone who has been through a traumatic experience. So we really have thought outside of the box in the way we're thinking about that. The other thing is with transitional age youth, a lot of times what you're finding is an identity formation phase, right? So they're trying to figure out who they are. They're trying to figure out what does it mean to them, what do they want to be called, how do they want to be seen, how do they want to dress, how do they want to label themselves or not label themselves, which is something new and I'm trying to attach to, right? So that's happening at the same time they're trying to grapple with things. And so we try and have events where they can explore that. We have a jam session a couple times a month. They're playing the guitar and the keyboard and they're singing and we're picking all different kinds of music. We have trauma-informed yoga. We have drumming. We have a substance use group. So we're just trying to provide as many opportunities for them to engage and explore, ask questions, figure out who they are, look at what that looks like. We bring a lot of partners on site to support us in that. The other piece of this is thinking about transitional age youth. I think we often do them a disservice by thinking, okay, we have to treat them like kids then, so they're under 18. But they're not, right? So they're technically legally adults, but they're not an adult with a fully formed functional frontal lobe, right? So they're not there yet. So we don't want to treat them like babies and we don't want to baby them, but we also don't want to assume that they have it all together. Here's the secret, though. You can't tell them either of those things. It doesn't work, right? So you really have to talk to them at the moment where they are, who they are. And so you have to give them the option to make mistakes. How many of you were 18, 19, 20 years old? And there's no judgment zone, right? We don't judge here. How many of you made a mistake at that age range? Come on, I see you, Joe. Yeah, you made mistakes, every one of it. If you didn't raise your hand, you're not telling me the truth, right? Yeah. We're going to make mistakes. So what we can do when we're talking about transitional age youth is be there when they recognize it was a mistake. Be there when they recognize, shoot, I shouldn't have done that. That was tough. We had a scenario recently in working with some of our young people. She made a decision to get in a car with a person that probably wasn't the best idea, right? She's 19. She ended up in another state. And she called us. And we could have been like, why did you go with him? We told you, right? We could have went all out in that situation, but we said, how do we get you home? That was the response, right? How do we get you home? And so that's the way we really have to think about these crises and what's going on with transitional age youth is they're not experiencing in the same way as our young children and what's happening there, and they're not experiencing in the same way as adults. We have to meet them where they're at, help develop safety for them, and really figure out how to allow their voice and choice, not what we want or we think is best, to enter into that space to best help them.
Great. And so with that, talking about the brain development and the trauma, when we talk about teenagers or young people who are dealing with crisis, and how do we support them, and how do we help them navigate their crisis and be there for them, and Shantina said some great things they're doing at Orangewood Foundation. They are amazing, Orangewood Foundation. We're so lucky that they got the contract and have done such a wonderful job with Project Choice. I want to share with you now what we're doing in the county, child welfare, and some of our partners, and what we're doing to address the trauma that the children have experienced, whether being removed or the abuse that they experienced prior to coming to our attention. We are implementing a trust-based relational intervention. It is a therapy or approach, an attachment-based trauma-informed intervention that we are going to be working with our children. You are some of the first to know. It's been something that's been around for a while, and some of our agencies like Olive Crest and OC United have been using it for some time. We in child welfare here in Orange County have just started to begin to implement it in some of our, in our Orangewood Children and Family Center. Okay, so let me clarify. People will confuse Orangewood Foundation and Orangewood Children and Family Center because they're both called Orangewood.
And we raised the money and built it, but then gave it to the county.
Yeah.
So the building belongs to the county, the operations belong to the county, and we work with transitional age youth now.
And no one wanted to change the name. So here we are with two Orangewoods, but Orangewood Children and Family Center is the emergency shelter in Orange County when a child comes into protective custody and doesn't have a family person to go with or a family friend to go with. They can come into our emergency shelter for 10 days while we find a place to go for them. So we are implementing trust-based relational intervention there. And let me tell you a little bit, and I have my notes here to refer back to. I'm not as brilliant as Shantina here with all the information in the brain. I need to have my notes. And that's just the truth, and that's all right. And so let me tell you a little bit about what TBRI is. It has 3 principles. It has and we're going to go over it real fast because it is actually a 24-hour training for caregivers or for people who are working with young people who have experienced trauma. So we're going to go lightning speed, just touching over what some of it is. It has 3 principles. One of them is the connecting principle. It's about having mindfulness and engagement. So when you're working with a youth who is experiencing a crisis or is acting out or is behaving in a way that you cannot get through to them, the first thing you need to do that TBRI says, you need to connect. You need to connect. You need to be mindful about what are you bringing to the table. What is your behavior? What is your tone? What is your body language telling that child? Because that's really important. Our kids, all of our kids, however old they are, they see it. They see it so clearly. So you have to be really mindful of what you're bringing to the table. You have to then engage the eye contact. If touch is okay, a touch on the shoulder, something like that, kind of read the child and see if that would be okay to do. Match the behavior of the child and the body language. If you can tell the child's heart rate is up, you want to think about bringing that down and just stop and just be calm and engage with the child about who they are, not what they did. The other second principle is empowering. And empowering includes the ecological, which is set up a successful healing environment by creating daily rituals. So if you have a child that you're in regular care of, whether you're providing care for that child on a daily basis or you have a classroom setting, you're a teacher, something like that, having the daily rituals become points of connection. We've seen videos, right, of teachers doing the high five and different high fives. I don't know if you've ever seen those viral videos. I love watching those. And the teachers are bringing the kids in their room with their own special high five. That is ecological. It's setting up the daily ritual. It's allowing those points of connection. Especially if environments are very chaotic, it brings that child straight to you in that moment. Then the physiological, exactly what Shantina said about eating right now. Exactly that. And it is finding out where they're at. Are they hungry? Are they thirsty? Is that what this is about? Who gets hangry? Yes, right? When you're hungry, can you do much? Do you get mad? Yes. Same for our kids. It is eating, drinking is a sensory-rich experience, and that needs to be checked in upon with our kids every 2 hours. Every 2 hours, really checking in with them. What research shows us is that over 85% of children from trauma experience have some sort of sensory need beyond that of a child who has not experienced early developmental trauma. Therefore, understanding how to interpret behavioral outbursts as possible sensory needs and then meet those needs is key in providing the feeling of safety for our children. I mean, it's so basic, right? What I love about TBRI is I think anybody can do it. Anybody can do it. You don't need a doctorate. You don't need a master's degree. It's human behavior. It's really just understanding that at its basic form, which is why we in Orange County really find this to be really effective. The third principle is correcting. Correcting is taught during calm times. The proactive correcting is taught during calm times. Correcting includes proactive and responsive. I should have probably said that. So proactive is during those calm times, doing peekaboo games, teaching. It's those teachable moments, teaching how to hold it, maybe a hamster. That's proactive correcting. Oh, you don't hold it like this. You need to hold it like that. This could hurt the hamster. This may not. Right? So that's correcting, but it's calm and it's proactive. You're teaching something to that child and maybe giving them a little bit of empowerment over what is going on for them. And then there's responsive. But you're going to offer tools to use in the moment of an outburst. And so this becomes more impactful, so it won't happen as much when you do this in that moment. So I have an example here. So think about when someone has a baby. They spend about the first 2 years of life telling them yes, right? If any of you have had little babies, you tell them yes a lot. But then it's about toddlerhood when they hear their first no. And so much trust is built during those first 2 years of life. All the yeses and all the nos, and the yeses mean yes and the no mean no. And so trust can be broken by a caretaker if they're very young. And so we want to repair that in these proactive correcting and responsive correcting principles. And trust can be built upon the first meeting. Karen Purvis, the Karen Purvis Institute, she's the one that came up with TBRI. And she describes that having a bubble gum at all times and saying yes every single time a child asks for bubble gum. So that's it, again, in the first moment. What can you say yes to every single time to a child? So you have to think of something you really, really can say yes to. And then they use their words, and you make eye contact with them. And so you're building that trust. It takes 400 repetitions of an act to get a new synapse, or 12 repetitions with joy and laughter, and we get a synapse because we get dopamine. So teaching through play in a proactive correcting is where we build the synapses quicker. So you want to do it in a playful way, when you can, as much as you can. And there are four levels of engagement response in TBRI. There's, as I was talking about, kind of alluding to, playful, structured, calming, and protective. So playful is whenever you're going to respond to a child that maybe is demanding, you may respond like, "Are you asking me or telling me?" Again, you're going to watch your tone, be mindful, make the eye contact, stop what you're doing, and pay attention to that child in that moment. Structured is giving choices or making compromise with good words. So you want to encourage the child to use good words, encourage the teen to use good words, and give them a compromise. I mean, I think if anyone's ever taken a parenting class, or you were told this, right, the best thing you can do for a toddler in particular is give them choices. You want to wear this outfit or this outfit? Do you want to have this for dinner or this for dinner? And so it's the same is true in working with kids with trauma as well. Calming is helping them be calm and still and think about what they need. Again, it's that connecting, calming. And then protective, letting them know you are going to protect them. You are there to protect them. Letting them know that you will stop for them. But it's not just letting them know, it's showing them that. Letting them know that if it's in your power, you will move heaven and earth to make whatever it is that they want happen to meet their needs. And this really is about holistic healing, giving the youth back the voice that they may have lost along the way. Listening to them, letting them know you are on duty, you are present, not just saying it, but doing it, being the safe adult, regulating the external, so that helps them learn how they can regulate the internal. And one of the sort of phrases that you can always remember in TBRI is connect before correct. Connect before correct. And so we have been finding this. We have some of our partners, Saddleback Church and Foster Care Kinship Education has TBRI classes. There's caretakers in the community that are using TBRI in their homes with adolescents and young kids, and it's working for them. And so we're really excited to start using it within our own emergency shelter that we have in Orange County, because we know the trauma that our kids and the crisis that they have, and how can we best support them. And this is the direction that we are going at this time. Yeah. Awesome. So tell us, Shantina, about transitional age youth population and a little bit about maybe some myths or some how you work with that population.
And I think that's perfect because, just going off of TBRI, I think for many years I've been in the trauma-informed community, and one of the things that people always assume that if you're taking a trauma-informed approach, there's no consequences, right? Or you can't say no, or you can't, and that's actually just not true. So the truth of the matter is when you're doing trauma-informed, there are consequences, but sometimes they're not external consequences, and that's what I want to talk about, like the myth, especially with transitional age youth. I think I kind of alluded to this, and I tried to set myself up for this, but when you're talking about transitional age youth, a lot of times we assume that one, somehow magically you turn 18, you eat your Lucky Charms, and you got it. Like, you just know what's going to happen, right? You have the skills, you have the wherewithal, and we just believe you're 18, like you're ready for the world, right? Join the military, do whatever you need to do, just go. You got this. But when we're talking about young people who have had these adverse childhood experiences, these traumatic experiences, the likelihood is some of their social growth has stunted, right? It's gotten stuck. It needs a little greasing. It can move, and it absolutely can move, but oftentimes they haven't had the opportunity to learn those social skills or basic life skills. If I ask you to pause and to think about who taught you how to drive, more than likely you pictured someone caring and loving and a person in your life that you trusted. When you're talking about our youth in a lot of these situations, that person is not there. There isn't someone to teach them that. Your very first job interview, who told you what to wear or helped you think about or practice the questions or made sure you left on time? Probably a caring adult in your life, right? Those are social skills that you were being taught that you didn't know you were being taught. And when those things are missed, but we just expect those Lucky Charms to happen at 18 and it's all good, they're all moving forward, it just doesn't work that way. But yet we have these expectations on our young adults. You're 19 now, you're 20 now, so figure it out. Or you made that mistake, well, now here's the consequence. But a lot of times the consequence is the lesson. The consequence is the learning, and how do we help them take that and use some motivational interviewing to help them really look at what happened in their life, what are their goals, and where do they want to go, and make a new route, right? When we pile on all the consequences and we look at those things, it really just makes our youth not want to talk to us, to be honest. So there's that balance of just making sure it's not that we're going to ignore it. It's not that we're not going to pretend it didn't happen. It's how we approach it, and when we're thinking about with our young people that they're learning the lesson of just having to talk to you is a lesson. So just having to admit that there was a mistake is a lesson. And then how do we work through that? I need water. But how do we work through that? So that's like just some of the myths when we think about a young person turning 18 and they've got it, right? Or they've fixed it. But there's also the flip side of that, is our youth who have gone through these things are not broken. And I'm just going to pause and let that sink in for a second. They're not broken. They don't need to be fixed. They may have some development that needs some greasing, right? They may have some places that we can help them along, but it's not that they are broken. I'm not broken. You're not broken. We're not broken. So that's one of the biggest myths we can take away from this work and what we are doing, that we are here to build, not fix. We are here to grow, not plant, and that is our work.
I see Christine looking at us.
Time's up.
She's giving us that
We're
look.
done.
She's giving us that look. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Recognize it.
Can you hear me? Okay. All right. Well, I failed in the very beginning to give you two a round of applause for being here. So right now, let's give you guys a round of applause for all of your work. Oh, no, you're good. No, we've got a few questions here. You're not running that fast. But the theme I'm hearing this morning from the other two plenary sessions that we had is that it's our community for our students and our youth, and also meeting them where they're at, and youth having a voice. So I'm going to put my old lady glasses on here. So the first question for either one, can you both tell us about the resources available for resource families that are licensed for pregnant and parenting foster youth?
Resource foster youth. Well, tomorrow afternoon at 1 o'clock, there's a workshop on resources in Orange County for resource parents. Please come. I'll be there. Love to go into all the details that we have, and I'm co-leading that with Kendra Tankersley Davis, and she'll have everything outside of Orange County. There she is. Yay. But so the person wants to know, though, about a resource family that provides a home for a parenting youth?
Resources available for resource families
For resource families.
that are licensed for pregnant and parenting foster youth.
So a resource parent in California, a resource parent can determine, once they're approved, their approved resource home, what age they're open to having in their home. And so if we have a resource parent out there that's willing to take a parenting teen, please let me know, because you are a unicorn, and we need you. Most of the time when we have a parenting teen, if they're not home or with a family member, we find them in a short-term residential therapeutic program. And resources?
I mean, I know a few, so
Yeah.
public health nurse. Yep.
Yes,
So,
yes, yes.
Yeah, so there's
Okay.
public
Yeah.
in Orange County. So the state of California actually subscribes to positive youth development. Positive youth development, family life planning. I'll try not to get too nerdy. Sometimes I do. But those are basically just ensuring that we have mapping for family life planning. And in Orange County, they've chosen to use those dollars through our public health nursing. So you can actually sign them up. I think it's 16 and up. With public health nursing, where they come out and they do home visits during the prenatal portion of the pregnancy as well as after. and they help the young person throughout that journey of pregnancy and their early childhood years. So that is one resource that would be available. Secondarily, we also in Orange County have Fristers, which is a great program that works with young mothers and young fathers, and they provide groups and support and resources and workshops and education and transportation. They have amazing resources. We have Casa Teresa that also works with pregnant young women. And then we now have a home, Orangewood Foundation, we opened Casa de Rosemary. So it's a home for young mothers 18 to 21 who have a child 0 to 3 in Orange County. And so we have a 5-bedroom home where the young people are able to live, and we're working with them on their life skills and also in parenting of their child. And then there are also resources for home visiting through First 5. They have home visiting while your child is 0 to 5, where they come in the home and help you with parenting and nutrition and all of the education you would need around there. And then FKCE has a ton of classes for foster parents and resources. And then Orangewood, we do classes for our caregivers because we have the independent living program. So if you have an adolescent in your home as a resource parent, we have nights where we have your adolescent comes to a class and workshop, and then we have a class and a workshop for the resource parent. That's going to still be years. But they can always reach out to us and request a specific class, and we would do it. We also do the CSEC education and awareness classes for resource parents. So I think that's quite a few resources.
We are lucky in Orange County. We do have a lot of resources. Another question, can staff from other organizations have access to the TBRI classes?
Yes. Staff from other organizations. If you go onto Eventbrite and look up Vulnerable Children Initiative, the Vulnerable Children Initiative, there's lots of classes there. OC United has classes. Olive Crest has classes. Many of them are open to the community. If anyone, though, would like more specific links and information, I'd be more than happy to provide that. If you want to provide me your contact information afterwards, I'd be more than happy to provide that. But those are really easy places that you could Google. We're currently working on, I don't know if it's up and running right now. We have a meeting on Monday about it. But there will be a website, TraumaWise Care, if I'm remembering it correctly, traumawisecare.com. I think, is where our TBRI Collaborative is going to be housed here in California, so you can find out where all the classes are. Also, OC Navigator, which is ran by Healthcare Agency, we're going to have information about TBRI on that, so if you go into OC Navigator, you can put in TBRI and find out some more information.
Thank you, Nicole. This is a great question. How do you navigate family cultural differences alongside possible child abuse?
That's a heavy one. How do you navigate alongside? I think you just have to be really mindful and open and understanding that there are some cultural differences, and there are things within a family that may not be considered abusive in their culture. And so there's some education that happens with what the laws are here, but there's also a level of having to respect and learn and ask them the questions. What is your culture? What is the norms for you? You know, how do you parent? And really trying to understand the culture if it's different from your own, listening to that, and then if it's not a problem, it's not a problem, right? But if it is, it does cross the line, and it's something that is considered child abuse in the state of California. It's educating. I have had to do that before, and so sometimes it's not resulting in removing a child, but just that education so they understand the laws here.
And I would just also say confront your own bias.
Yes,
I think in general, we have a society, we have systemic issues, we have bias. And that bias is in every one of our systems, including child welfare, including the work that we do. And so we have to be cognizant and aware that each of us carries our own bias. When we walk into a room, we walk into a space. And so the way we view the world may not be how others view the world. And we have to enter into that space with that knowledge, understanding, and openness, but also to recognize that our systems are designed and built to see people as different and as others. And so once we can own that and confront that and walk into spaces with it, you start to see the world very differently. So I think that's the baseline of it, is confront your own bias.
Absolutely. Okay, another question. What resources are available to kids who need extra support, i.e., children with autism in the foster care system?
Very niche.
Yes. Okay, so I can't think of anything like offhand, but I know we have a bunch. I'm looking at Kendra because you have to come to our resources thing tomorrow. Really come to it tomorrow.
I was going to say, well, typically most youth, for me, when we had youth who would come to us who had spectrum pervasive development disorder, typically for us through the school district is where most of those resources came forward. So making sure they had an IEP, making sure they had advocacy, making sure they were receiving those services in the school district was a wealth of help. The regional center is another option in making sure you get them connected. I work in community resources all day. No, it's not Nicole's fault.
Yeah, I know.
That's what I do. But yes, but yeah,
it's not really very different in the foster care system. The resources that are available to the general public are resources available to children in care. So it's all, yes.
One resource that I do love is Task, which is actually a parent organization specifically for supporting parents of children with any kind of behavioral health or educational need. And they are not lawyers, they're not going to go that route, but they will talk you through what is an IEP, what is the process, and like what do those things look like to help the parent be educated before walking in a room. So I often just encourage people to join Task.
All right. One last question. What is motivational interviewing?
Oh, what is motivation? Oh, we can have a whole talk. No, Maria, come up. No, I'm just kidding. One of my staff's back there. So motivational interviewing is, I'm going to get a little woo-woo, but motivational interviewing is a way of being. It's a way of being. So, but it really what it is it's a way to speak to other people. It's ensuring that you are not putting yourself in as the savior and rescuer again, but you really are seeing the other person. And so it involves stages of change, which we follow, and that really is the pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance, and relapse. Meaning that all of us, I know that was really fast, but you're just going to have to come for like a 4-hour training. But really, it's walking through a journey with someone as they decide to change something in their life. So whether that's leaving the life, whether that's a substance abuse issue, whether that's a DV issue, whether all issues in our personal lives, we go through a journey before we decide to change. You just may not recognize it, and we go through a journey once we decide to change, and we go through a journey when we're trying to hold to that change. And motivational interviewing is how we practice being in that space with someone without driving the bus.
So good. You're so smart.
Quickest way I can describe something very complex.
I love it.
All right. Well, we could be here probably for another 3 hours talking to you two ladies, but we have to move on. But we want to give you another round of applause for all their expertise, wisdom, and knowledge.